I came home late from work, exhausted and emotionally drained. Alex was sitting on the couch, glued to his phone like it was the most interesting thing in the world. I stood there for a moment, gathering the courage to say what I'd been rehearsing in my head all day. Alex, we need to talk. He looked up, surprised, his eyebrows shooting up as if he hadn't noticed my existence until that very second. I took a deep breath. The distance between us, it's just too much. I think we need a break to reassess our marriage. He blinked, set his phone down, and nodded. Just like that, no argument, no begging to understand why. He agreed, which left me feeling a weird mix of relief and unease. Was it really that easy for him to just let go? The next morning, I moved into the guest room. It felt strange, liberating yet overwhelmingly sad. I busied myself with chores, anything to avoid the gaping void that our house had become. Alex seemed indifferent, spending more time out with friends and less time at home. The man was a ghost, and not the friendly kind. I started spending more time with my friends, especially Sarah, my ever-patient confidant. Over coffee, I vented about the marriage, the break, and my sinking feeling that Alex didn't care. Sarah, bless her, listened and suggested I focus on rediscovering myself. Easier said than done, but it was a start. A few days into the break, I noticed Alex getting more texts and calls than usual. He'd step outside to take them, something he never used to do. My curiosity was piqued, but we were on a break. I had to respect his privacy, right? Sure, let's go with that. One evening, feeling particularly rebellious, I decided to go out with some friends to a new bar downtown. The atmosphere was electric, the perfect antidote to my gloom. For the first time in ages, I felt a sense of freedom. And then I met Daniel. Charming, attentive Daniel. We exchanged numbers, nothing serious, just a friendly connection. Harmless, right? Back at home, the polite indifference between Alex and me became routine. We shared the same space but rarely interacted. One night, I noticed Alex leaving the house dressed unusually well. Got plans? I asked, trying to sound casual. Going out with friends, he said, not bothering with details. Just like that, he was gone. My heart sank a little more. A week later, while cleaning the house, I found a receipt from an expensive restaurant tucked away in Alex's jacket pocket. My heart did that annoying sinking thing again. Who was he dining with? The realization that he might be moving on faster than me hit like a ton of bricks. I sat there, holding the receipt, feeling the weight of my own decisions. Rediscovering myself was supposed to be empowering, but right now, it felt like I was the one being left behind. The moment I decided to meet up with Daniel again felt like stepping off a ledge. I was feeling increasingly isolated, and the thought of his easy laughter was too tempting to resist. We went for coffee, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. He made me laugh, something I hadn't done in what felt like forever. Despite myself, I enjoyed his company more than I had anticipated. What started as harmless flirting was quickly becoming something more. The next day, Alex announced he was going on a weekend trip with his friends. He didn't invite me, which, given our situation, wasn't surprising. But the way he avoided eye contact? That made me suspicious. I nodded, hiding my feelings of betrayal behind a tight smile. Have fun, I said, my voice hollow. While Alex was away, I spent the weekend with Sarah. We talked about our lives, and I confessed to her about meeting Daniel. She seemed concerned but supportive, advising me to be careful. Just make sure you know what you're getting into, she warned. It felt good to have someone to confide in, even if my emotions were a tangled mess. Sunday evening, Alex returned home looking unusually happy. He barely acknowledged me before heading straight to the shower. I decided to busy myself with laundry, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. As I folded his clothes, a glint caught my eye. There, in his bag, was a woman's earring. My hands trembled as I held it, the confirmation of my fears staring back at me. I felt a hot wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. Determined to confront him, I waited until he was settled in the living room. Holding up the earring, I demanded an explanation. Alex looked startled but quickly recovered, his face a mask of calm. He claimed it must have belonged to one of his friend's girlfriends who might have dropped it. Sure, because women just casually drop earrings into other people's bags. I wasn't buying it. Unsatisfied with his answer, I decided to follow him the next time he went out. The opportunity came a few days later when he said he was meeting friends at a local bar. I waited until he left, then discreetly followed him. To my dismay, he drove to a different location entirely, a high-end restaurant downtown. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked a safe distance away and watched him enter. Through the restaurant's large windows, I saw Alex sitting with a group of people, including a woman who seemed particularly close to him. My heart raced as I watched them laugh and share an intimate conversation. Anger and heartbreak fought for dominance as I snapped a few pictures with my phone. What was supposed to be a break to reassess our marriage was quickly unraveling into something far more painful and complicated. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what I had just witnessed. Alex wasn't just moving on, he was moving on without a second thought about me. The realization hit hard, I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. As I pulled into the driveway, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I needed to confront Alex with the truth and face whatever came next. I couldn't wait any longer. That night, I confronted Alex with the photos. There was no dancing around it, no gentle approach. I dropped the printed images on the table in front of him. Care to explain these? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. He looked at the photos and then at me, his face a mix of guilt and resignation. Okay, yes, I've been seeing someone else, he admitted, his words slicing through the silence. He claimed it was because he felt neglected and lonely during our break. As much as his confession stung, I couldn't deny there was some truth to his feelings. I had been distant, consumed by my own issues. Despite the hurt, I decided not to make any rash decisions. What good would storming out do? Instead, I suggested we attend couples therapy to see if there was any way to salvage our marriage. Alex agreed, albeit reluctantly, and we scheduled our first session for the following week. During our first therapy session, we both aired our grievances. Alex talked about feeling unloved and unappreciated, while I expressed my frustration with his emotional distance. It was a brutal but necessary conversation. The therapist suggested we both needed to make an effort to reconnect and rebuild trust. Easier said than done, but at least it was a start. Following the therapist's advice, Alex and I began spending more time together. We started having regular date nights and made an effort to communicate better. There were moments of genuine connection, fleeting glimpses of the couple we used to be. But the shadow of his infidelity loomed large over us, a constant reminder of our fractured trust. One evening, while having dinner, Alex's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and quickly put it away, but not before I saw the name, Clara, flash on the screen. My heart sank. It was like a punch to the gut, realizing that his affair might not be over despite our efforts. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to confront Alex once more, this time with a calmer demeanor. Are you still seeing Clara? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, his eyes darting away from mine. Then he admitted that he had tried to end things, but she wasn't willing to let go. I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. How were we supposed to move forward if he was still tangled up in his mess? Determined to find a resolution, I suggested we take a break from therapy and instead focus on spending a weekend away together, just the two of us. A change of scenery might help us reconnect. Alex agreed, and we planned a trip to a cozy cabin in the mountains, hoping to rekindle our relationship. The drive to the cabin was awkwardly silent, both of us lost in our thoughts. I was trying to stay optimistic, but the nagging doubt wouldn't let me rest. We arrived and settled in, the picturesque setting doing little to ease the tension between us. We spent the first day hiking and trying to enjoy each other's company, but it felt forced, like we were playing roles rather than genuinely connecting. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, I decided to address the elephant in the room. We can't move forward if Clara is still in the picture, I said, breaking the silence. You need to make a choice, Alex. He looked at me, a mixture of frustration and defeat in his eyes. I know, he said quietly. I'll call her tomorrow and end it for good. I nodded, hoping that this time he meant it. The next day, Alex made the call while I took a walk by the lake, trying to clear my mind. When I returned, he looked solemn but resolute. It's done, he said simply. That night, for the first time in a long while, we talked. Really talked. About our fears, our hopes, and what we wanted for the future. It wasn't a magical fix, but it felt like a step in the right direction. We returned home with a renewed sense of determination to make things work, knowing it would take time and effort from both of us. As the days went by, the tension between us slowly started to ease. We continued our therapy sessions, worked on rebuilding trust, and slowly, painfully, began to heal. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wondered if it was worth it. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward, not just going through the motions. The journey was far from over, but at least we were on the same path, walking it together. We arrived at the cabin on a Friday evening, the setting almost too picturesque to be real. Snow-capped mountains, a serene lake, the works. It was the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. As we unpacked and settled in, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this trip would help us reconnect, put the pieces of our fractured relationship back together. The first day went smoothly. We hiked through the forest, the natural beauty around us almost distracting me from the tension that had become our new normal. We even managed to have some light-hearted conversations. For a fleeting moment, it felt like we were a normal, happy couple again. That night, we shared a bottle of wine by the fireplace, and I felt a flicker of the old intimacy that used to come so easily to us. The next morning, while Alex was making breakfast, I decided to check my phone. I was greeted with several missed calls and messages from Daniel. He'd been trying to reach me, worried about my sudden silence. A pang of guilt hit me, but I chose to ignore the messages. This weekend was supposed to be about Alex and me, fixing what was broken. As the day progressed, Alex and I continued to bond. We went canoeing on the lake and even managed to laugh together. It felt good, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Alex seemed distracted at times, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. That evening, after a long day of activities, we settled in to watch a movie. Halfway through, Alex received a call. He stepped outside to take it, and I couldn't help but eavesdrop. The conversation was brief but tense, and when he returned, he seemed distant again. The flicker of hope I had been nurturing started to dim. Unable to contain my curiosity, I waited until Alex was in the shower and checked his phone. The call log showed multiple calls from Clara. My heart raced as I scrolled through their messages, discovering that they had been in constant contact despite his promises to end the affair. The betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. How could he do this to me? To us? Feeling the familiar sting of betrayal, I decided to confront Alex immediately. When he came back from the shower, I was waiting, his phone in hand. Explain this, I demanded, showing him the messages. He looked at me, then the phone, and sighed. I'm struggling to let go of Clara, he admitted, not even trying to deny it. The weekend that was supposed to bring us closer had only revealed deeper rifts. Anger and hurt bubbled up inside me. This was supposed to be our time to fix things, Alex, I said, my voice shaking. But you're still tangled up with her. How are we supposed to move forward like this? He looked defeated, unable to meet my gaze. I know, he whispered. I'm sorry. Sorry? Sorry didn't cut it, not now, not after everything. I turned away, feeling the weight of our broken promises and shattered trust. The serene beauty of the cabin now felt like a cruel joke. There was no escaping the reality of our situation. We were more lost than ever, and I didn't know if we'd ever find our way back. The drive back home was tense and silent, like the air was thick with unspoken words. Both of us were lost in our thoughts, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. I kept my eyes on the road, my mind racing with everything that had happened. Once we arrived, the silence stretched as we unpacked. Finally, we decided to take some time apart to think about the future of our marriage. During this time, I confided in Sarah again. She listened patiently, offering her support and advice. Over a glass of wine, she gently suggested that perhaps it was time to consider a separation. It seemed clear that Alex was unable to fully commit to our marriage. The words stung, but deep down, I knew she was right. Alex moved into his own apartment temporarily, giving us both space to reflect. I spent the days focusing on my work and hobbies, trying to rediscover myself. The constant tension that had become my normal was gone, replaced by a strange mix of loneliness and relief. Despite the empty house, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, feeling particularly restless, I decided to meet up with Daniel again. We went out for dinner, and I found myself enjoying his company more than ever. He was attentive and kind, making me feel valued and appreciated. As we talked and laughed, I realized just how much I had been missing this kind of connection in my marriage. It was a bittersweet revelation. Meanwhile, Alex seemed to be struggling. He reached out to me several times, expressing his regret and asking for another chance. Each message was a mix of desperation and apology, but I remained cautious. Could I really trust him again after everything that had happened? The doubt gnawed at me, making every decision feel like a gamble. In an attempt to find some clarity, I suggested to Alex that we attend a few more therapy sessions before making any final decisions. He agreed, and we scheduled a meeting with our therapist. The sessions were intense, with both of us expressing our fears and hopes for the future. It felt like peeling back layers of old wounds, painful but necessary. During one particularly emotional session, Alex broke down and admitted that he was still in love with Clara. He apologized for his actions, but said he couldn't continue living a lie. His words were like a punch to the gut, but they also provided the clarity I needed. The truth was laid bare between us. There was no going back to the way things were. I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with heartbreak. The facade had finally crumbled, leaving us with nothing but the raw, painful truth. Alex's admission was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. It hurt like hell, but at least now I knew where we stood. As I walked out of the therapist's office that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The decision had been made, and there was no more uncertainty. The path ahead was clear, even if it was lined with heartbreak. It was time to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. The challenge was daunting, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. I was ready to face whatever came next. Separation is never easy, but it's even worse when it's the only option left. After that gut-wrenching therapy session where Alex admitted he was still in love with Clara, we decided to officially separate. The process was as difficult and emotionally draining as you'd expect. Dividing our belongings was like slicing through our shared history with a dull knife. The whole time, I kept reminding myself that it was the right decision. I moved into a new apartment closer to my workplace. It was small but cozy, and for the first time in a while, I had a space that was entirely my own. I took the opportunity to decorate it to my taste, filling it with colors and things that made me happy. The change of environment was refreshing, a much-needed fresh start. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. Alex and I stayed in contact, mostly to sort out the logistics of our separation. Our conversations were civil but distant, like we were polite strangers navigating an awkward situation. It was weirdly comforting to have that distance, though. It gave me the space I needed to find a routine that brought me some semblance of peace and stability. Daniel and I continued to see each other. Our relationship grew stronger as we spent more time together. He was understanding and supportive, always knowing when to listen and when to offer a distraction. It was in those moments that I started to feel hopeful about the future again. Maybe, just maybe, things would turn out all right. One day, while cleaning out some old boxes, I came across our wedding album. Flipping through the photos, I felt a strange mix of nostalgia and sadness. It was a reminder of happier times and just how much had changed since then. Looking at the smiles and the joy captured in those photos, it was hard to believe how far we had fallen. I put the album away, not ready to deal with those emotions just yet. Eventually, I decided to meet with Alex one last time to finalize our separation. We met at a coffee shop and discussed the remaining details. It was a bittersweet conversation, filled with apologies and well wishes. We agreed to remain amicable for the sake of our shared memories. It was strange, saying goodbye to someone who had been such a significant part of my life, but it was also a relief to finally have closure. With the separation finalized, I felt a sense of closure. It was time to move forward and focus on my own happiness. I threw myself into my work and hobbies, finding joy in the small things. The future felt uncertain, but I was determined to make the most of it. There was a certain freedom in starting over, in knowing that the next chapter was mine to write. And this time, I was going to make sure it was a story worth telling. I never thought picking up a paintbrush again would feel like reclaiming a piece of myself. As I settled into my new life, I decided to take up painting, a hobby I had abandoned during my marriage. The smell of acrylics and the feel of the canvas beneath my fingers were strangely therapeutic. Each brush stroke allowed me to express emotions I hadn't realized I'd been bottling up. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself and find peace. Daniel was my biggest cheerleader. He encouraged me to pursue my passions and supported me every step of the way. Our relationship blossomed as we explored new activities together. From hiking in the mountains to trying out cooking classes, Daniel brought a sense of adventure and joy into my life that I hadn't known I was missing. His enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Reconnecting with old friends and making new ones through various social events expanded my social circle and brought a renewed sense of belonging. These friendships became a crucial support system as I navigated my new reality. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone in this journey. We shared laughter, stories, and the occasional bottle of wine, weaving a new tapestry of memories. One evening, Daniel surprised me with tickets to a concert of my favorite band. His thoughtfulness left me speechless. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by a sea of ecstatic fans, I realized the importance of being with someone who truly cared about my happiness. The night was magical, filled with music, laughter, and a sense of connection that made me feel truly alive. Despite everything, Alex and I occasionally exchanged messages. We updated each other on our lives, maintaining a cordial relationship. He had moved on and was now in a relationship with Clara. Although it was painful to think about, I wished him well. It was time to focus on my own journey and let go of the past. As time passed, I felt more confident and self-assured. I had learned valuable lessons from my marriage and the subsequent separation. These experiences had shaped me into a stronger, more resilient person. I was proud of the woman I was becoming, someone who could face challenges head-on and emerge even stronger. To celebrate our one-year anniversary, Daniel and I decided to take a trip together. We chose a beautiful beach destination, the perfect escape from our daily routines. We spent a week basking in the sun, swimming in the sea, and enjoying each other's company. It was a perfect way to mark the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, filled with love and adventure. Upon returning from the trip, I received an unexpected job offer. It was a significant promotion that required relocating to a new city. The opportunity was too good to pass up, but it meant a lot of changes. I discussed it with Daniel, and after weighing the pros and cons, we decided to take the leap together. The prospect of starting fresh in a new city was daunting, but it was also exhilarating. We were excited about the opportunities that lay ahead and ready to embrace this new adventure. As I packed up my apartment, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From the heartbreak of separation to the joy of new beginnings, every step had brought me closer to discovering who I truly was. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time, that uncertainty was thrilling rather than terrifying. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing I had the strength and support to navigate any challenge. Moving to a new city felt like diving into the unknown, but it was exactly the kind of adventure I needed. The charming apartment we found had a cozy balcony overlooking a bustling street, and the change of scenery was invigorating. It was like hitting the reset button on life. Daniel and I quickly adapted to our new surroundings, exploring every nook and cranny of the city. Each discovery brought us closer, strengthening our bond in ways I hadn't anticipated. My new job was everything I had hoped for, challenging but incredibly rewarding. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove myself. The supportive environment and exciting projects reignited my passion for my career, and I thrived in my new role. I felt like I was finally where I was meant to be, both professionally and personally. Daniel also found a job he loved, and we settled into a comfortable routine. We made new friends and built a life together, filled with love and laughter. It felt like we were finally creating the future we had always dreamed of. The city became our playground, each day an opportunity to explore and make new memories. One weekend, we decided to host a housewarming party. Our new friends came over, and the apartment buzzed with energy and excitement. We spent the evening celebrating and enjoying each other's company. It was a joyous occasion that marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Looking around at the smiling faces, I felt a deep sense of contentment. As the months passed, I realized just how much I had grown since my separation from Alex. I was happier, more fulfilled, and genuinely excited about the future. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by a sense of optimism and hope. It was like I had shed an old skin, emerging stronger and more resilient. Daniel and I continued to nurture our relationship, always finding new ways to surprise and support each other. We went on weekend getaways, tried new hobbies, and made time for regular date nights. Our love grew stronger with each passing day, and I cherished every moment we spent together. Feeling the urge to challenge myself further, I decided to enroll in a night class to learn a new language. It was a fun and enriching experience that broadened my horizons and introduced me to new people. Daniel joined me, and it became another shared adventure. We practiced together, laughing at our mistakes and celebrating our progress. It was a reminder that we could tackle anything as long as we were together. We also planned a trip to Europe, a dream destination for both of us. The trip was filled with breathtaking sights, delicious food, and unforgettable experiences. Wandering through the historic streets of Paris, sailing along the canals of Venice, and savoring the culinary delights of Barcelona, we reveled in every moment. It was a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had to look forward to. Returning home from Europe, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The adventure had not only been a testament to our love, but also a reaffirmation of my own strength and resilience. I was ready to face whatever came next, confident that I could handle anything life threw my way. Daniel and I were building a life together that was rich with love, laughter, and endless possibilities, and I couldn't wait to see where our journey would take us next. Returning from Europe, my phone buzzed with a message from Alex. He wanted to catch up and see how I was doing. I stared at the screen for a moment, my mind racing through all the memories, both good and bad. After some consideration, I agreed to meet him for coffee. It felt like the right time to close that chapter of my life completely. Meeting Alex was surprisingly pleasant. We talked about our lives, the changes we had gone through, and the paths we had taken. He seemed genuinely happy with Clara, and to my surprise, I felt no resentment or anger. Our conversation was peaceful, providing the closure I hadn't realized I needed. Returning home, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I shared the experience with Daniel, who was supportive and understanding as always. He knew how important it was for me to find closure and move on completely. Inspired by the conversation with Alex, I decided to write about my journey. I started a blog to share my experiences and the lessons I had learned. The writing process was therapeutic, allowing me to connect with others who had gone through similar experiences. It felt good to pour my thoughts onto the screen, knowing it might help someone else. The blog gained a following, and I received messages from readers who found solace and inspiration in my story. It was fulfilling to know that my experiences could help others navigate their own challenges and find hope. Each message was a reminder that sharing our struggles can create a community of support and understanding. Daniel and I decided to adopt a dog, adding a new member to our little family. The dog, a lively golden retriever we named Max, brought so much joy and energy into our lives. We loved taking him on adventures and cuddling with him at home. Max's boundless enthusiasm was infectious, adding an extra layer of happiness to our daily routine. As our second anniversary approached, Daniel surprised me with a beautiful necklace. It was a symbol of our journey together and the love we had built. I was overwhelmed with gratitude for having found such a wonderful partner who appreciated the significance of our shared experiences. We celebrated our anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, reminiscing about our journey and looking forward to the future. The evening was filled with love, laughter, and a deep sense of contentment. It was one of those perfect moments that make all the struggles worthwhile. Reflecting on the past few years, I realized how much I had grown and how far I had come. The pain and challenges had shaped me into a stronger, more resilient person. I was proud of the life I had built and the person I had become. It was a journey of self-discovery and transformation, and I had come out stronger on the other side. Daniel and I continued to dream about the future, planning new adventures and setting new goals. We were excited about the possibilities and committed to supporting each other every step of the way. The future felt like a blank canvas, ready for us to paint our dreams upon. One day, while walking in the park, Daniel proposed. It was a beautiful, heartfelt moment, and I said yes without hesitation. We were both ready to take the next step in our journey together. The world seemed to hold endless possibilities, and we were eager to explore them side by side. As we started planning our wedding, I couldn't help but feel grateful for everything that had led me to this point. The journey had been challenging, but it had brought me to a place of happiness and fulfillment. I was excited about the future and ready to embrace whatever came next. Life had a way of surprising me, and this time, it was in the best possible. The moment you find a hotel receipt in your fiancé's purse for a weekend she was supposedly visiting her sister, your world starts to tilt. That's how it began for me. Maria and I were packing the car for what was supposed to be the ultimate road trip before we tied the knot. A last adventure is two, before becoming one. The receipt fell out, fluttering to the floor, and I couldn't help but notice the date. It didn't add up. Hey, what's this? I held it up, trying to keep my tone light, but my heart was already racing. Maria glanced over, her smile faltering just a fraction before she recovered. Oh, that must be a booking mistake. You know how it is with those online reservations. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. So, I let it go. Or at least, I pretended to. The trip started off as everything we'd hoped for. Endless roads stretched out before us, each day promising new adventures. But then, one night, as Maria thought I was asleep, I overheard her whispering affectionately into her phone, a stark contrast to the conversations we'd been having. My stomach twisted into knots. It was the first real hint that the receipt was no mistake. I tried to shove the doubts to the back of my mind, focus on the landscapes rolling past us, the playlists we sang along to, the greasy diner breakfasts. But the unease wouldn't leave me. It all came crashing down when a mutual friend let slip something about Maria and someone else. I thought Jake knew, they said, their face turning pale as they realized the mistake. That night, I waited until Maria was sound asleep, her phone abandoned on the nightstand. I knew it was a violation of her privacy, but the suspicion was eating me alive. And there it was, all the evidence I needed in texts and photos. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. Confronting her was the hardest thing I've ever done. The motel room felt too small, the air too thick as I laid out the proof before her. Maria broke down, admitting to everything. The affair had been going on for months. The road trip, our premarital celebration, felt like a farce. I can't do this, I said, the words tasting like bile. We're going home. The drive back was torture. We barely spoke. Maria tried to apologize, to explain, but the betrayal was too deep. Once we got back, I moved out immediately. The wedding was off, and so was whatever future we thought we had. That road trip was meant to be the beginning of our forever. Instead, it was the end. The end of us, of trust, of the life I thought I knew. And as I drove away from our shared apartment for the last time, I couldn't help but feel that the real journey was only just beginning. A journey to find myself again, without Maria. The morning after calling off our wedding, the air between Maria and me was thick with unsaid words and regrets. She tried to fill it with pleas for forgiveness, her voice trembling with promises that it was all a mistake, that she could change. But some mistakes are too big, too deep. I couldn't just unsee the betrayal, couldn't unfeel the heartbreak. So, I stayed firm, my decision unwavering even as her voice broke. At breakfast, in a quiet diner off the highway, Maria slid her engagement ring across the table. It clinked against the formica, a sound far too final for my liking. Without picking it up, I left it there, a tip for the waitress maybe, or a cursed token for whoever found it next. I didn't look back to see what became of it, the symbolic end of our future together. Back in town, moving out of our shared apartment felt like tearing off a limb. Each object I packed was a memory, a moment in time when things were good, when our biggest worry was what to make for dinner, not shattered trust. The silence of my new, smaller apartment was a stark contrast to the life I had envisioned with Maria. But Maria wasn't ready to let go. My phone became a constant reminder of what I was trying to escape, buzzing with her attempts to reach out. Texts, emails, voicemails, each one a plea for another chance. It was relentless, a torture in its own right. Blocking her was my only reprieve, a digital barrier to guard my slowly healing heart. Life had to move on, and so did I. I threw myself into a new job, a fresh start where no one knew my past or the scars I carried. It was liberating in a way, focusing on mundane tasks, learning new names, being part of something that wasn't tainted by betrayal. But Maria wasn't done. One day, my phone exploded with notifications from friends about a public apology she'd posted online. A long, heart-wrenching confession of her mistakes and how much she still loved me. It was dramatic, designed to pull at the heartstrings of anyone who read it. Anyone but me. I had no heartstrings left for her to pull. So, I did the only thing I could. I blocked her, erasing her from my digital world as I had tried to erase her from my heart. The universe, however, seemed to have other plans. One evening at the gym, amidst the clang of weights and the drone of treadmills, I spotted her. Maria. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe I had just built her up to be this giant in my mind. Our eyes met, and for a second, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. Then reality crashed back, and I remembered the woman she had become. She started towards me, lips parting to speak, but I couldn't hear her. I didn't want to. Turning on my heel, I walked away, the sound of my heartbeat drowning out everything else. That encounter at the gym was a stark reminder that moving on wasn't just about physical distance or blocking numbers. It was about healing, about finding a way to live with the scars. And as I walked away from her, from us, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was starting to do just that. The day started like any other at my new job. I was finally getting the hang of things, feeling a semblance of normalcy returning to my life. That is until Maria showed up, unannounced and unwelcome, her appearance slicing through the calm like a knife. She made a scene, loud and emotional, right in the middle of the office floor. My coworkers stared, a mix of curiosity and discomfort in their eyes as I tried to usher her out, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Maria, you can't be here. Please, just leave," I begged, my voice low, desperate to avoid further spectacle. But she was relentless, her pleas for me to listen, to give her another chance, echoing off the walls. It took every ounce of self-control not to respond, to just walk away. Finally, she left, but the damage was done. The whispers started almost immediately, a mix of pity and intrigue that followed me for days. I considered legal action, even consulting a lawyer about getting a restraining order. But something held me back. Maybe it was the hope that Maria would find her way without me, or perhaps it was the remnants of what we once had. Either way, I decided against it, a decision I'd come to question in the days that followed. Maria's desperation knew no bounds. She reached out to my friends and family, trying to rally a force to plead her case. It was manipulative, a play on the relationships I valued most. And then came the ultimate betrayal. I found out that one of my closest friends, someone I'd trusted implicitly, had been seeing Maria. The news felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me reeling. I confronted him, the anger and sense of betrayal boiling over. "How could you?" I demanded, the friendship disintegrating before my eyes. He had no real answers, just mumbled apologies and excuses that fell on deaf ears. That was the end of it. Another casualty in the wake of Maria's chaos. As if to twist the knife further, Maria and my now ex-friend flaunted their relationship publicly, a spectacle designed to provoke a reaction from me. But I refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I channeled my energy into positive outlets, joining a local sports team and volunteering. It was a way to rebuild, to focus on something other than the mess my life had become. Then, the letter arrived. Handwritten, its pages filled with Maria's confessions of love and regret. She spoke of mistakes and a desire to make things right, to return to what we once had. But as I held the letter, I felt nothing. The words that once would have meant everything to me now felt hollow, empty. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on moving forward, on the new paths I was carving out for myself. Maria's letter found its way into the trash, a symbolic gesture of letting go. It was time to close that chapter, to embrace the future, however uncertain it might be. The moment I saw Maria's handwriting on the envelope, my heart sank. There was a time when a letter from her would have made my day. Now, it just felt like another attempt to claw her way back into my life. Without giving it a second thought, I tore it up, pieces of her apology fluttering into the trash like the final leaves of autumn. It was over, and I was determined to leave it that way. Life, however, had a way of testing that resolve. At a mutual friend's party, our paths crossed again. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Maria tried to approach me, her eyes searching for some sign of the love we once shared. I couldn't bear it. Before she could utter a single word, I made my exit, the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears as I left. But then, the tranquility of my newfound solitude was shattered by a series of anonymous threats. Texts, calls, letters left on my doorstep, each one more menacing than the last. It didn't take a detective to figure out who might be behind them, or at least who might have incited them. Enough was enough. I installed security cameras around my house, a digital watchful eye to catch whoever was trying to intimidate me. And it didn't take long. The footage was clear as day. Maria, under the cover of night, vandalizing my car. The sight of her, once so beloved, now a figure of spite, felt surreal. With the evidence in hand, I went to police. Filing the report felt like crossing a Rubicon, there was no going back after this. Maria was arrested, and the wheels of justice began to turn, slowly but inexorably. The trial was a blur. Sitting in the courtroom, recounting the events that led up to her arrest, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. The person I once loved was now a stranger, sitting on the defendant's bench, facing charges because of what she'd done to me. When the verdict came and Maria was found guilty, receiving a restraining order and a short jail sentence, part of me wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant even. But all I felt was a profound sense of loss. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the entire ordeal pressing down on me, I realized that this was not just the end of Maria's trial. It was the closing of a chapter in my life, one that had brought me both the greatest joy and the deepest pain. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it, whatever it might bring. The day Maria was released from jail, a ripple of unease went through me. I heard through the grapevine she might be leaving town for good, and part of me couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and apprehension. It felt like maybe, just maybe, I could finally close this painful chapter of my life and move forward. And moving forward is exactly what I started to do. I met Liz, a woman whose kindness and understanding seemed to know no bounds. With her, I found a sense of peace and happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. She knew about my past, about Maria, and she accepted me, scars and all. But just as I was beginning to feel like I could breathe again, Maria reached out. She said she was leaving town and asked to meet one last time, to apologize in person. Against every instinct telling me to ignore her, I agreed. Maybe I needed the closure, or maybe I just needed to see for myself that I was truly over her. We met in a public park, a neutral ground bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Maria looked different somehow, softer, regretful. She apologized, her words sincere, or at least they seemed to be. She talked about change, about understanding the pain she caused, and wishing nothing but the best for me. Listening to her, I realized I had already found my closure, not in her words, but in the life I had started to build without her. I accepted her apology, not for her sake, but for mine. It was time to let go of the anger, the betrayal, and the hurt. I hope you find what you're looking for, Maria, I told her, but it won't be with me. As she walked away, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. It was finally over. Maria was leaving, and I could put all of this behind me. With Liz by my side and a future filled with possibilities ahead, I felt ready to leave the past in the past. That day in the park wasn't just about saying goodbye to Maria. It was about saying goodbye to the person I was when I was with her. I was ready to move on, to embrace the happiness I had found with Liz, and to face whatever challenges and joys the future might bring. Maria's departure marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in my life, but it also marked the beginning of something new, something better. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly looking forward to what was next. Just when I thought the dust had settled, the shadows in my life grew longer, more menacing. Liz and I, we were finding our rhythm, a new beat to dance to after the storm. But that's when I noticed it, the feeling of eyes on us, a presence lingering just beyond the edge of vision on our dates. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia, the leftover scars from my past with Maria. But when you feel watched, it's hard to shake the feeling. The realization hit me one chilly evening. The face in the crowd wasn't just any face. It was him, Maria's new partner. The one she moved on to when our world together crumbled. Seeing him there, it wasn't just a coincidence. He was there for me, a dark reminder of a chapter one thought I had closed. Confrontation was inevitable. One night, as Liz and I left a restaurant, the shadow stepped into the light, and all my fears were confirmed. It was him, and the air crackled with tension. Words were exchanged, heated, angry, and then it escalated. Blows were thrown, a dance as old as time, fueled by pain and revenge. It ended with him on the ground and me, standing over him, breathing hard, heart pounding. The police arrived, sirens cutting through the night. He was arrested, but not before his threats echoed in my ears, a promise of more to come. It was a wake-up call. My world, Liz's world, it wasn't safe. Not yet. So, I fortified our lives, installing cameras, locks, anything to keep the darkness at bay. But with each new security measure, I saw the light in Liz's eyes dim a little more. The danger Maria brought into my life was like a poison, seeping into every crack, every crevice of happiness I tried to build. Liz and I, we started to crumble under the weight of constant vigilance. The stress, the fear, it became our constant companion, and eventually, it was too much for Liz. She left, the love we shared not enough to weather the storm Maria's shadow cast over us. And there I was, alone again, my life a fortress against threats real and imagined. The joy I found with Liz, now just another casualty in the wake of my past with Maria. It was my downfall, a solitary existence defined by the aftermath of a love gone wrong. The final nail in the coffin came one quiet night, a message that chilled me to the bone. "This isn't over," it read, a simple declaration of war from Maria's partner. It was a promise of more darkness to come, a storm on the horizon with no shelter in sight. As I stared at the screen, the reality of my situation settled in. I was alone, truly alone, in a battle I never wanted. The final confrontation loomed large, an ominous end to a saga marked by betrayal and revenge. My downfall was complete, a life once filled with love now overshadowed by fear and loss. The story of Jake and Maria, a cautionary tale with no redemption, no victors, just the remnants of a love that was. The story I am about to tell is full of mystery, betrayal, and unexpected twists of fate. It is a story of adultery, deceit, and bitter payback. It all started with a regular day when I discovered that my wife was cheating on me. It was like a hammer blow to the heart. I felt a mixture of rage, resentment, and frustration. But I was determined not to let it go unpunished. I decided to take revenge to make her feel the same pain that I had felt. I devised a daring and ruthless plan that robbed her of her future and left her by the wayside. But what secrets did I discover along the way? What dangers and trials awaited me? You'll learn all this and more in this gripping tale of repaying your wife for cheating on you. Welcome to a world of intrigue and drama, where the boundaries of revenge and justice blur. Are you ready to walk this journey with me? Then let's get started. And here we go. Hi, everyone. And I apologize for my Russian. I don't use it much in writing. I was born back in the USSR. My parents, in the murky waters of the 90s, were very successful in catching fish in the form of dollars. And although the situation in the country was profitable, my parents did not like the prospects and sent me to study in the country of dwarfs. After finishing school, then university, and later graduate school in Switzerland, I received first a residence permit and then citizenship. Having received a good education, I was invited to work in a serious bank. All this time, I regularly went home to my parents. The benefits of airplanes were not far away, and I could afford it, of course. On one visit, I turned my attention to my neighbor. She always lived next door, but was always a snot-nosed girl. And here she became a beauty. In short, I fell in love. At 19, she was no longer a girl, but I was no longer a boy. In general, I did not bother and flew back and forth over half of Europe. About 6 months later, she called me in tears and told me she was pregnant and was going to have an abortion. Like a real dear, I stopped her, flew home, took her and dragged her to Switzerland to register. True, to live in the land of Gnome's wife did not want, or rather wanted, but inconstantly, explaining this departure for his parents and his beloved grandmother. And again, I, like a real dear, was ready for anything. So we flew back and forth, spending more time in Russia than in Switzerland. Fortunately, I mostly worked remotely and handled investment accounts for Russians. So my superiors approved of my movements, as it kept me closer to my clients. However, I brought my wife to give birth in the country of dwarfs. So my daughter received Swiss citizenship by her father, that is by me and my place of birth. We lived that way for 4 years, as it seemed to me, in love and happiness. I pampered my girls, especially my daughter, who grew up to be a real daddy's little girl. My wife did not like my daughter. She did not even want to feed her in order to save her breasts. But I did not care about that. I was doing everything myself. And if I could, I would breastfeed. Anyway, for 4 years, all was well. And 3 days after her 4th birthday, she didn't come home. I didn't come the next day. She didn't come until the 3rd, when I had already charged the cops to look for her. She came in and said we were getting a divorce. And we were getting divorced because she never loved me. She had always loved somebody else. But that guy was framed and locked up. And she was pregnant. She didn't want to kill the baby from the guy she loved. So she married me. And now that guy is out, and she and her daughter will live happily ever after with him. After saying this, she shoved a pre-made DNA test under my nose, showing that alas, I was not the father of the child. And to this, she added the summons to court to deprive me of paternity. All in all, it felt like I had been hit in both of my heads with a sledgehammer. While I was in a state of utter fucking astonishment, she grabbed my crying daughter and with the words, "Let's go to daddy," dragged her away. Then there was a court to deprive me of my paternal rights, at which to her surprise, I declared and lied that I knew that the child was not mine. And the father was recorded with my consent. And under the law of the Russian Federation, that makes me the father. And to deprive me of paternal rights requires more serious grounds. My lawyer backed me up. And in the meantime, my wife said that they wanted child support. At the same time, my daughter was not given to me. Yes, while all this was dragging on, my mother tearfully admitted to me that she suspected that the child was not mine. She said that I had been seriously ill with scurvy as a child. And even back then, doctors warned me that I almost certainly would not have children. In general, after a week of torture, early in the morning, I came to the kindergarten to talk to the principal. Friends, subscribe to the channel under this clip. His subscription you motivate me to write interesting stories and more and help the channel in development. And now back to the story. She told me that according to her mother's, well, she could not give me a child. But she said that the child changed a lot, became unsociable, cried a lot, and obviously came to the kindergarten hungry. Then I told her I had international written permission to take the child out of the daycare. And in response to her surprise, I pulled out of my pocket a small, but still a wad of evergreen American rubles. Looking at her hesitation, he reported some more. The principal, after a quick glance at the wad of American 100 notes, brought my daughter, who immediately threw herself at my neck and reminded me that my mother usually comes for her by 6, because the girl is at after-school care. After saying thank you very much, I took my daughter and rushed with her to the airport. Fortunately, my wife didn't take my daughter with her documents when she left. My daughter clung to me the entire way and asked, "Won't you give me away with you?" He won't hit me anymore, and told me that he hit her with a pillow. I wanted to turn around and rip his head off. But my father, who was driving, said he would deal with it himself. At the airport, I just bought 2 tickets for the next flight overseas. I didn't care where. I needed a change of jurisdiction. In short, 2 citizens, or rather citizens of Switzerland, took 12 hours to get to the country of the dwarfs. The next day, I asked an audience with the head of my department at the bank, and honestly, as it were, told him the situation, saying that if it could damage the bank's reputation, I was willing to quit. He replied that no, so I would sit back and keep my head down. A few more hours later, I was brought before 3 people, the head banker of our institution, the head lawyer, and the psychologist. At their request, I repeated the whole story, saying that according to my daughter, she had been beaten and tortured. Then they told me to get out and wait for the verdict. Then they sent for my daughter and the psychologist talked to her. Then they called me in and told me not to worry, for such a story, with a limited eye, oddly enough, would benefit the bank and that it would be handled by a lawyer, whose card was handed to me. A few days later, I received a summons to court, where I appeared with the same lawyer. There I was announced that I was charged with kidnapping a child, to which my lawyer replied that I was a Swiss citizen, had taken my daughter, a Swiss citizen by birth, out of Russia, whom her mother had tricked into taking to her lover in the wilds of Siberia, and would not let her back to Switzerland, and that I had filed for divorce because of my wife's infidelity. In general, the judge quickly made a decision that a citizen of Switzerland, I mean my daughter, will live with her father, and at the age of 24, she will decide whether to move to Siberia. At the same time, she can see her mother as often as she wants, but only in the country and under the supervision of third parties. What now? My daughter lives with me. She already goes to school and comes with me on vacations to warmer climes. My ex was left with nothing, for, according to the contract, my house in Switzerland, mine, and it has nothing to do. Also, as well as to my bank account, for, the same marriage contract in Switzerland love, and from the changers do not love. The apartment in that Russian city where we lived was bought in my father's name, as well as the cars. I disconnected the Swiss cards with a single phone call, and the Russian ones proved to be simply useless, for, money was transferred to those accounts from Switzerland as needed, and the need disappeared. According to the father, the love of his life kicked her out as soon as he realized that he could not get anything from the Swiss sucker, and the only leverage in the form of a child flood. In general, he beat her and kicked her out, announcing that he would not forgive her for the fact that she slept with who knows with whom he met for 4 years. My father did not give her the jewelry, he said that it was all granddaughters. The lover really came to my father, tried to scare him and knock out this very jewelry, but the old retired pensioner suddenly became a serious tycoon of the dashing 90s, so the lover and his cronies ran away losing their slippers. The former problems with Russian justice were helped by my Russian clients, so the Russian court also left the child with me, yes, and the mother's right to communication. She, of course, tried to argue on the grounds that she could not fly to Switzerland every other weekend. The judge explained to her that that was her problem. I saw her several times when I went to visit my parents, she cried, saying that it was a mental breakdown, that she loved only me and that life without me was no fun for her. I listened, of course, listened politely and then said that I understand that life with me in a cabin in the mountains and travel around the world is much nicer than working 12 hours at the cash register at the local store, but she made her choice and she has to live with him. That is, with him it is a choice, but without me and my daughter and I are sure to live without her somehow. Dear listeners, please share your opinions in the comments. What do you think? Did the main character do the right thing, that he took such noble revenge on his ex and his cheating wife? Or maybe for the sake of the baby, he should have given her more of a chance to see her. Or should he? Now on to the second story. In the world of cheating and betrayal, there are stories that make us think about how difficult it is to know the true face of someone we thought was close to us. And here is one such story that opens our eyes to the unpredictable nature of infidelity. It is the story of a wife who suddenly and ruthlessly cheats on her husband, and not with someone random, but with his best friend. But the most shocking thing about this story is not only that she has found solace in the arms of her lover, but also that this lover gropes her 3 times a day, while her husband is unable to give her such pleasure. So what causes a wife to turn to another man in search of true passion and sexual satisfaction? How does this infidelity affect the dynamics of family life and the relationship between husband, wife, and friend? Dive into the shocking story of how a wife cheats and what lurks behind her quest for a more passionate and fulfilling life. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Then let's begin a journey into a world of mystery and intrigue, where nothing is what it seems at first glance. So, about everything in order. My name is Aliona. I am 38, my husband is 40. Married for 13 years, there is a wonderful daughter, she is 12. I love her very much, and my husband does not dote on her. I love my husband and believe that we have a strong family, because we got married for love. Although I had many suitors before him, and I have been sexually active since I was 16, and he knows a lot of things, and of course he does not know about some things, I did not tell him everything. In terms of spousal duty, everything seems to be fine, but to be honest, my husband is not a titan in this, but I love him and I partially close my eyes to it. Over the years, of course, there were small trips to the left, but nothing more serious, a couple of hookups at corporate events, and after them. My husband, of course, does not know anything, everything was very carefully. He never cheated on me, of course. Although corporate, so to speak, Andrews, I do not consider treason. My husband is tall, handsome, and smart. He teaches at the institute. He is a historian by training. I, on the other hand, am a spectacular brunette who loves sports, fitness, and swimming. But now to the problem. I work for an insurance company, a friendly, close-knit team. And then 2 years ago, a new employee came in. Nothing impressive. He was 1 meter tall, half a head shorter than me, overweight, fat, and not athletic. We even joked about it all the time, but it was like he didn't notice it, you know. And he did everything with the look of a real match. Then he would make a joke, and then he would tell a foul-mouthed joke in front of the girls. Yeah, like that. And then came December. My husband leaves on business trip to the department until January 29th, and on January 26th our friendly staff corporate party. All dressed up, and our new employee in Volodya dressed casual, as if he had come to work. And so it turns out that he was sitting next to me, and it was in a restaurant. And he suddenly began to woo me so cleverly that in half an hour I forgot the wrinkled jacket, belly, and the growth of a sitting dog. He turned out to be a surprising dancer, and in general the soul of the company. We went for a long walk until 5 in the morning. I left my daughter at her parents'. And by this time we were pretty drunk. And then Volodya suddenly said, "I want you." In another setting, he would have at best received a slap from me, but the champagne worked a miracle, I thought. Why not? It's silly, isn't it? For some reason we went to my place. And then it turned out that Volodya was as hairy as a gorilla, and that turned me on. My husband, a refined person and somewhat shy, by the way, and here's a mini King Kong, was handling me much better than my husband, and with foul language and vulgar jokes. It made me feel so crazy it was unbelievable. I was a respectable mother and wife, and here I was being treated like a girl from the streets. I woke up at 12 p.m. On the phone 5 missed calls from my daughter. I promised her to go to the movies that day. How bad was it for me? Words can't tell. Volodya left a note. It's okay. I liked it. So let's get it over with, and fly over to this address at 11 p.m. and the phone number there. I was so disgusted that words can't express it. I called my parents and asked them to pick up my daughter from school and leave her with them for a few days. I cried for 2 hours, slowly came to my senses, cleaned up the apartment. I began to go over the events of the previous day and night. And suddenly, I realized that I was on fire again. Last night had given me something that, as it turns out, I had been deprived of for the past 13 years. My husband had given me everything. As it turned out, I needed other things as well, and I needed them badly, so I had no energy to endure. I, of course, called Volodya and came to see him. Everything repeated itself, the drinking. Now I was drinking vodka and all the other delights. In the morning of the 28th, I called my boss and informally asked him to excuse me for a week at his expense. I simply had no strength to go to work and to see the eyes of the employees for the time being. On the 29th my husband arrived, I cooked a delicious dinner, opened the cognac, and it was as if everything was back to normal. My husband was surprised by my vacation. We have a sliding schedule and we have almost no New Year's holidays. On New Year's Eve, I did my best to be a good wife and a wonderful mother. Everything seemed fine, but on January the 5th I was all over the place. After lying out loud about the problems of his girlfriend, I went to Volodya all night. After that night, all hell broke loose. I could not think about anything but bed with this man. My beloved husband had ceased to excite me at all in this respect, and there was nothing I could do about it. Fortunately, for the last 5 years we have been having it no more than once a month. My husband is a bit cold and his science is busy, so he did not notice anything much. And I'm afraid to just look my daughter in the eye, she already understands everything, it seems. All my thoughts are about Volodya. And it seems that the whole office already knows about our relationship, but fortunately all the quiet so far. Life, it would seem, goes on as usual. The whole family goes on vacation, my husband and I have quite good salaries. We organize trips to nature with friends, the gym and the pool, my second home. But it's all a mirage, I think about it all the time with Volodya. We do it 3 to 4 times a week, for a year and a half now. At his house, at my place, even in the bathroom at work on my lunch break. Yeah, that's how bad I am. Most importantly, I do not even like Volodya. And what can there like? He is not very educated, untidy, his one room is a mess and filth. He is a terrible bore and vulgar, and hairy as an orangutan. He does not swear, but speak foul language, he and disgusting. Anyway, but I want him badly every day, every hour. I've tried to distract myself. I've had a couple of affairs, but it's not the same. It's all very conventional. The worst thing is that I'm not the only one. He has a couple of girlfriends from the working areas, from the bottom of society, so to speak. He is good with, and I'm dying for it when I imagine him with someone else. And he once told me a bastard, look, but you're old. Yeah, a couple of years in a trash can. I cried all day afterwards. I do not know what to do. I love my husband, my daughter madly and leave them. Of course, do not plan to in nowhere. Volodya does not need me. And he is younger than me by 7 years. If my husband does find out, he will definitely divorce. He told me after the wedding that he would never forgive infidelity and for nothing kick me out of the house uniquely. The apartment was his before marriage. He will not give his daughter away. And there is no place to go with her. My parents have a one-room apartment. The 4 of us cannot live there. We must urgently break up these relationships. How? How to do it? What to do? Maybe go to the site, do not make the gate. Maybe to church, some kind of compulsion. God forbid my husband finds out ashamed, disgusted, just awful. Help me advise at least something to advise. Maybe quit my job. Forgive me for a kind of chaos. Literally some kind of adult film turned out even ridiculous myself, but not to the laughter. I would be grateful for any advice. Dear listeners.